Welcome back to another episode of What's the Point? The show where we discuss varying forms of media and occasionally we actually get round to asking the question, what's the point? Let's go. Hello again, I am your host Michael. I'm joined as ever by our co-host Matthew.
Hello.
Before we get started today, please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and head on over to Patreon to give us a donation. And then let us know in the comment section below how to start a Patreon page. What's the point of discussion for today, Matthew?
We're going to talk about reboots, remakes. What's the point in them? And do they stifle creativeness?
Do they stifle creativity? Yes.
Yeah.
No.
So I think we
No,
should.
yes.
I think we should tackle. Do they stifle creativeness first?
Creativeness?
Then go on to reboots. What makes them good? What makes them bad?
I think we need to define what a reboot is. Because, alright, what's the difference between a reboot and a remake?
I'll give you my definition.
There isn't really like a lot on the subject.
In my tiny little universe that I live in, this pocket universe, to me, a reboot is where you take a IP or franchise with the same
IP or franchise?
IP or franchise, yeah.
Don't talk to me that way.
You take a IP or franchise with the same characters, same names, and inject new life into them by doing a different story with those characters. Perfect example would be Batman Begins and the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman's been around for years, but it kind of gone Joel Schumacher-esque, which nobody should ever go never go full Joel Schumacher. And then Nolan
struggled to get that one
out.
out.
Yeah, struggled. Yeah. Then Nolan came along, rebooted it, injected new energy into it.
Okay,
now hang on.
Wait a second. Didn't so Tim Burton started that original franchise off?
No, he rebooted Adam West, but did it well.
Okay,
and that's what we're going to come on to later. Good reboots and bad reboots.
So he rebooted Batman from the old hammy 70s, or is it 60s?
70s.
Early 70s, late 60s.
Pow.
Yeah, he rebooted that into the Tim Burton-esque Batman and Batman Returns, but then Joel Schumacher was supposed to be making a continuation.
Yeah, those are supposed to be sequels,
but they feel more like reboots.
They feel more like complete shit.
But without criticizing the film itself, everything about it changes. You get a new Batmobile, you get a new actor. I guess doesn't really count, but it's worth noting. You get new set design. Visuals are completely different.
I don't think it was a reboot.
New music. Cinematography changes. Everything about it changes, but it acknowledges that it's a sequel to Batman Returns.
So it's still in the same universe with a different take on it. To me, that's not a reboot. Like we say, when we get to Batman Begins, everything's different. The concept's different. It's Batman in the real world. The Tumbler is supposed to be like a real military vehicle.
So a reboot is almost like a parallel universe. Because it is, because it's the same. It's the same characters. It's the same places, but they exist in a completely separate world.
Yeah, they give it new life. Whereas a remake to me is just another word of remade, and it's beat for beat a story with characters, but remade at a different time.
So, like if Christopher Nolan would have taken the Batman story, and instead of going with an origin story, he started out with this: Batman's chasing down a gangster, knocks the gangster into a vat of acid.
Yeah, Vicky Vale.
Yeah, that gangster comes back as the Joker. Now all of a sudden we're talking a remake.
You're remaking it, yes. So a good example of a remake.
You might even use the music as well, the same Danny Elfman score.
Yeah. A good example of a remake then would probably be.
Well, my suggestion is Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead is Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is a very good example because the original Dawn of the Dead was a zombie apocalypse, survivors caught in a shopping mall, how they survive fighting the zombies, and then them getting away. That's basically the exact same beat for beat of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
It's basically what if George Romero had the technology
to make fast, good-looking zombies.
Yeah, to make that level of gore. Which, don't get me wrong, well, he was the master of practical gore effects.
Harry Hamlin's, I think it's Harry Hamlin's Clash of the Titans. great classic movie. Stop motion Kraken, stop motion Medusa.
But if they had CGI, they would have made a very similar movie to the modern one.
The modern one's basically the same. You've got Perseus. You've got pissing off Zeus, so therefore they're going to kill Andromeda by sacrificing her to the Kraken. Perseus has to go kill Medusa and cut off her head and use that to kill the Kraken.
And just talking about Dawn of the Dead real quick, here's another thing that really ties remakes together. The screenplay is still written by George Romero.
Oh, there you go.
It's directed by Zack Snyder, but it's written by George Romero and James Gunn. So usually you'll find in remakes the original crew were involved.
Right, yeah.
Because let's take a look at a soft reboot, quote-unquote, Star Wars The Force Awakens. They're a completely different crew. Other than arguably Kathleen Kennedy and maybe some other Lucasfilm execs, everyone involved in The Force Awakens, minus some of the actors, of course, were completely brand new.
Yeah, and I think...
Still Industrial Light and Magic, but...
I think reboots and remakes have their place in the world. Recently, I believe that we're relying on them too much, and that's where I come on to the topic of I think it is stifling creativity in Hollywood. And like we discussed off air, not so much stifling it, because we are getting some really, really good Netflix, Amazon originals. But it seems like all the original content is being pushed to these platforms, and all the money and the big box office being thrown at what I want to say is lazy creativity.
Well, I mean, I have a theory. Theorycraft. I think nostalgia sells.
Oh, 100%.
It's obvious that it sells.
Well,
but we're in an unprecedented time where the population of the planet is larger than it's ever been, which means there are more people out there who want their nostalgia bone, like the funny bone, want their nostalgia bone tickled.
Well, the perfect example of that is Stranger Things. The story of Stranger Things is a really good story, and it could have been set in 2017 when the first season came out. There was no reason to have that set in the 80s except to tickle the nostalgia bone.
But you could argue, though, there's some homage going on there, too.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with tickling the nostalgia bone. I love having my nostalgia bone tickled every so often, and especially when it comes to the 80s. And it worked with Stranger Things.
But that doesn't mean rebooting something, though.
No.
You could do Stranger Things.
Yeah, but look at the point, just quickly diverge here, where setting something specifically to tickle the nostalgia bone is bad. I'll give you two examples. The latest X-Men franchise and the stupid century hopping, which didn't make any sense. And then...
Where's the nostalgia tickling, though?
Because what? So why jump from...
Nobody's nostalgic about that.
No, why jump from... No, but why jump from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s? It was to tickle the nostalgia of those decades. There's no reason for those films to be set in those... In fact, it doesn't even make sense.
Sort of, because... No, I disagree. First Class made sense.
Yeah.
It was... They chose that era because that's part of the story, is that it's in the Cuban... They're in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
And again, though...
And they're being used as weapons at the height of the Cold War.
Again, why is that the best one, though? Because that one makes sense.
It's a fairly original take.
Yeah, there's then no sense to set the next one in the 70s, and then the next one in the 80s, and then the next one in the 90s.
They had no choice, because in order to make it match up with the previous X-Men movies, they had to eventually get to the 90s.
Yeah, but if it was a reboot, it didn't need to match up with the latest X-Men.
It wasn't really a reboot, though, was it? It was a prequel.
And then these stupid time jumps and no one aging didn't make any sense. So they used nostalgia. They picked those decades. They picked the 80s so that they could have that silly Return of the Jedi friggin' and have Sweet Dreams in there.
Well, see, that's basically why soft reboots don't work.
Yeah.
Because now if you use another sci-fi franchise that had a soft reboot, quote-unquote, you look at Star Trek 2009, as long as there is any sort of canonical connective tissue to the previous existing versions of that IP, that intellectual property, then you've got people who are going to pick it apart and hold it to that level of scrutiny. If Star Trek 2009 would have been just released, not as this time incursion where things have changed and we've got a new timeline, they just said, look, this is a completely new, reimagined take on Star Trek. It's not connected to the old original crew whatsoever. It's just brand new. it might have succeeded a little bit more. It might not have angered as many Star Trek fans as it did.
I think it would have succeeded better with neutrals, but it would never have succeeded with Star Trek fans.
No, it has.
Yeah. Another example
would
of
have
poor
probably
use of nostalgia, like you were saying, is the recent Wonder Woman movie. There's no reason for that to be set in 1984, except 80s nostalgia. In fact, it doesn't even make sense.
But that's not a reboot of anything.
No, but we're on about how they're doing it to tickle
although technically it's a reboot of the Linda Hamilton.
Yeah.
Not Linda Hamilton.
Yeah, she's in it.
What's her name?
Linda Carter. Linda Carter.
Linda Hamilton's from Terminator.
Terminator, yeah. So there you go. There's a reboot that didn't work.
Well, because again, like Star Trek
fiasco.
2009, there's too much connecting it to the previous films.
And this is
the only real way to make a reboot successful is to acknowledge that it has nothing in common with the original version of the film, other than the fact that it's the same characters and places.
Okay, so do you believe that all these reboots and remakes are stifling creativity in Hollywood?
Basically, it doesn't. So it can stifle creativity, but realistically, it's kind of made this new branch of creativity, a new way to be creative, because you've got to somehow make something that has already come before interesting again. But that's why I always wondered whether or not it's just nostalgia that people are buying when they buy tickets to these fucking reboots. Because I personally think it is stifling creativity, but you can't ignore that fact that it is now a new form of art.
New medium, yeah.
It's like reboot crafting.
I'm not going to say it stifles creativity. I've changed my mind. It stifles original thought. Because you now have a medium where you can just put your take on it slightly without actually changing that much. Now, to adapt a book takes a lot of effort and time to get it right. There are book adaptations out there that are complete dog shit. But when you do a book adaptation right, it translates into a phenomenal movie. Perfect example, Lord of the Rings.
Isn't that what's always been happening, though, since humans started making theatre? Because essentially the first movies were all just adaptations of Shakespeare,
yeah.
Julius Caesar, Macbeth.
And don't get me wrong, adaptations are right, but adaptation of a movie that only came out 5 years ago is just lazy.
But what stops the is it Henry V with Kenneth Branagh? What stops that from being just a reboot of the Shakespeare play?
It's what it is.
Or is it an adaptation?
And again, I'm not saying reboots are bad. What I'm saying is reboots, predominantly reboots to me seem lazy. I'm going to give an example. The Amazing Spider-Man pair. That is lazy film crafting. You had a good trilogy. I'm going to put 3 in there, of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. It showed Spider-Man from being at school and him advance all the way up to the end of Spider-Man 3 and losing his friend Harry. We then didn't need a few years later a reboot showing a Spider-Man at school learning his powers. That was lazy as fuck. Basically, the first Amazing Spider-Man took the first film, took Norman Osborn out as the bad guy, put in the Lizard, and put it on the screens. That is a lazy reboot and shows lack of creativity.
Well, but it's also a desire to make money. So they knew that they'd stumbled on something big, did Sony, when they were making those original Sam Raimi Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
And when they realized they kind of missed a step with the third one and it upset and disappointed a bunch of people, they probably realized, well, hey, let's
reboot this.
Let's reboot this. Let's bring all those people back. Let's get that lost audience back by giving them this promise of a newer, better Spider-Man.
And it didn't.
This is, in my opinion, the biggest problem. I'm not too concerned about the lack of creativity. I think those who want original content will find it, and as you said, with Netflix and Amazon Prime,
and
I found
someone like Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, I found a very charming, weird movie, a little bit of one of those sort of like awkward black comedies with Aubrey Plaza in Ingrid Goes West.
Man, you were going to push that film, aren't you?
Yeah,
are they paying you on the side?
It's a really good.
Hey,
it's a really good.
Go
film.
see it.
It's a pretty good film, but my point is though is that for those who want original content, original content will be there.
Yeah.
And it's become even easier now for people, for small budget companies, small budget studios, independent filmmakers to actually make original content, whilst the studios concentrate on making the making machines.
Okay, let me just finish my thought on the Spider-Man thing, though, because I think the Spider-Man arc is a very good example of good and bad reboots. So a few years after Spider-Man 3, they rebooted it with The Amazing Spider-Man, and it was showed lack of creativity. It was a poor movie. It didn't do really well. They then rebooted Spider-Man again with Spider-Man in Civil War, and then what came to be Spider-Man Homecoming.
I think they did that out of necessity, though, because
One, they did it out of necessity, but two, they did it right. They didn't do an origin story. They didn't do Uncle Ben's death. Spider-Man was already Spider-Man doing his Spider-Man shit, and Tony Stark found him.
I still don't think if the movie that they made with Andrew Garfield, if they'd have tried to do it without an origin story, I don't think that would have saved it.
No, because it was so close to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and that's why it failed. So what Marvel did was we don't want to have anything. We want to completely reboot it and just use the same character and the same name.
So just so you're aware, that The Amazing Spider-Man grossed $757.9 million. So it did actually do pretty well.
Against what budget?
$230 million. So it almost tripled its budget.
Which in these realms of a superhero movie is not very good, though, is it?
It's still a success, though.
Yeah.
It still shows that the studio that it can make money. I think Spider-Man is all about making money. That's why they sold. Well, they didn't sell the rights. How does that work with the Sony?
So
MCU
the MCU have rights to use Spider-Man in their movies for a certain amount of movies, and then they have to collaborate with Sony on 3 Spider-Man movies. That's why we're getting a third.
So there's a collaboration going
once
on.
that third movie's done, though, Sony have the rights back.
Oh, okay.
But the stupid thing is, Sony should just say, Marvel, we will sell you Spider-Man, but it is going to be mucho dollar.
So I think, are you done with your Spider-Man topic there?
Yeah, so I just want to quickly recap. I believe reboots and remakes have their place. I believe the majority of them, though, are stifling original content.
But to be clear, though,
on the big screen,
reboots, in a sense, have always been happening.
Yeah.
It's just that they become more prevalent. The larger the population, the larger the demand, the larger the pool of things to fish from.
In the movie industry, though, reboots are relatively new. Think of as a kid how many times you went to the movies to watch a film that had already been made.
Well, as a kid, it's hard to tell because you're a kid.
The original ones are kind of like the Hammer House of Horrors always got rebooted.
I think all of the remakes that we used to have,
Like
remakes were just that was
like
just,
what?
Okay, so I want to say Hateful Eight, but it's not.
Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent Seven.
So that got remade with Chris Pratt and Denzel Washington recently, and that was a remake of the Yul Brynner one. And it was near enough, beat for beat, a remake of a cowboy.
Flash Gordon.
But that was a remake of The
Irrelevant.
Seven Samurai.
Okay, but there you go then. Flash Gordon.
Never been remade. Original movie.
No, it wasn't. It was a remake of the Flash Gordon serials from
of a TV. So it was a movie, original movie of a TV series.
That's what I'm trying to say. So reboots have always been around in some form or another. They've just evolved now into this giant, ever-exploding machine.
Garbage pail.
Yeah, it's just...
Anyway, let's go on to what...
Endless trash!
Oh, no!
Gotta be careful.
Yeah, let's go on to then what makes a good reboot / remake and what makes a bad one then. Because we've said it's endless trash, but we both agree that there are some good reboots out there.
Well, first of all, if it's a good movie, it's a good reboot.
So, Total Recall. Good or bad reboot?
Bad reboot.
Why?
Because it's a bad movie. So you can argue that Total Recall was more of an adaptation of the original book. We'll remember it for you wholesale. It's a short story, sorry. But there was obviously some, winks and homages to the original Paul Verhoeven movie. And when you consider the fact that another Paul Verhoeven movie around that time was also rebooted in RoboCop, also another bad reboot. Bad for the same reasons, because they tried to reboot a property, and they were saying they're making their own thing, but in the end they were just trying to trying to cash in on the nostalgia of the original movies.
Yeah, I think the Total Recall was the one that tried hardest to make its own movie, because it's a complete movie that's set in reality until one weird point where his friend comes. It's so the scene in
it's the blue pill red pill scene.
Whereas the Verhoeven movie is from start to finish.
Verhoeven.
Verhoeven. From start to finish, that movie is designed to make you think: is this real or is it in his head?
Well, yeah, and Verhoeven's gone on record as saying it is made in such a way that the text of the movie it's whatever way you want it to be. It's all in his head, and it's simultaneously he's really a spy.
So are we going to say that
that's kind of in
Colin Farrell one? If they'd have not had that silly scene that made you think he might have been lobotomized, if they'd have just kept it 100% pure that this was a real spy guy had been mind off, it might have been a good movie.
Possibly, but as an adaptation of a short story, which is all about questioning your reality, it needed to be there.
So what they should have done is taken out that reality part, called it somewhat complete, Two Sides of Earth, make an original content movie. Because if they'd have not called it Total Recall, took that little bit out about whether reality or not, and called it the Two Sides of Earth because they have that big elevator that goes from, it would have been a really good original content movie.
Just like the RoboCop with Samuel L. Jackson in it. Why didn't they just
Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, he's the TV host. Mm-hmm. Why didn't they just make a new film about a cyborg soldier cop?
Yeah,
call it Cyborg Soldier Cop. So it didn't have to be RoboCop. And as a matter of fact, you get rid of all of the stuff that made the original RoboCop so great, like Bitches Leave, and I'll buy that for
an R rating.
The blood, the gore, the squibs,
a lot
of good writing.
Well, that's just it. A lot in that movie doesn't make sense. That is a movie that if they were going to do it, they should have done a remake, a beat-for-beat, violent R-rated with modern effects. Should have had Clarence Boddicker, you should have had Ed 209, you should have had a proper Ed 209, not those horrible tank-looking things. You should have had OCP being the overarching evil corporation, but with modern movie.
Yeah, but again, they want to maximize profits.
Yeah.
So to maximize profits, not only do you find something nostalgic to sell, but you also increase your audience by making it PG-13.
So and by appeasing the director and letting them have a bit of creative content as well.
So that's pretty much what I think makes a bad reboot.
Well, I want to throw to you here now a good reboot sequel. Well, no sequel. A good reboot series. And to me,
a rebootquel.
To me, it's the best reboot series out there, and everybody who's listening, so all three of you, should watch this. And it's the Andy Serkis Planet of the Apes.
I've never seen it.
You have Planet of the Apes. I think then it is Rise of the Apes, Planet of the Apes, and then War for Planet of the Apes. All three complete reboots. They have a few sprinklings of names of characters, and the common theme of the apes evolving is there, but it's not set up millions of years in the future. It starts with James Franco in modern-day San Francisco experimenting on an ape and basically genetically enhancing him, and then it's so well done.
See, I'd argue it's a remake of the Return to the Planet of the Apes. It's a remake of the original Planet of the Apes series, but in the middle of the series. They started with the middle, because that whole James Franco plot is not so. Return is the movie before the one with Ricardo Montalban. Ricardo Montalban is the James Franco character who takes Caesar and looks after Caesar and brings him up in the circus. So to me, that is a remake. The Tim Burton Planet of the Apes is a reboot because they take the idea of apes on the planet.
The entire threequel is a reboot of Planet of the Apes. And it's done really well because it does enough, like we say, to wink and acknowledge what came before, but gives us original content, which is and inject. To me, the new Planet of the Apes is like the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. Takes an original IP and injects new life into it.
But it still retreads all of the same beats of the original.
Kinda, films.
Yeah. But anyway, the point you're trying to make is the same thing I said about what makes a bad reboot. What makes a good reboot is that it's a good movie.
Yeah, and you.
I've not seen it, so I can't critique.
And you've got to watch it and tell your own story. Like a lot of these reboots, try and tell their own story while still trying to do the old wink to the audience about the old, and that's what makes them crap. It's like no, reboots are okay if you do them well. Take the franchise, take the name, and do something different with it.
Because to me, Batman Begins is great because it's a good Christopher Nolan movie. It could have been just a film about a vigilante samurai or a vigilante ninja or something.
Yeah, it takes the Batman world and puts it in the real world, basically.
But the fact is that if it's a good movie, then it doesn't matter if it's a reboot; it'll work.
Now, then let's move on to remakes, because we've talked about remakes and reboots being really similar.
I don't think we need to talk about remakes. I think we just wrap it up.
No, this is how I want to wrap it up. I want you to give me a couple of movies that you would like to see remade and how you'd like to see them remade. Because I've got a couple that I'd love to see remade.
See, I don't really want to see any remakes. I could stand to see maybe a Richard Donner version of the Superman film remade. Like the exact same film with John Williams music, but with modern day,
with Henry Cavill playing Superman,
possibly. I could, but
that's what I'm saying.
But so that's just like the guilty pleasure nostalgia in me. Realistically, I don't want them to fuck with it because we've got Superman the movie.
I'll give you
1978 Superman the movie is flawless in my opinion, and it doesn't need to be touched.
I will give you a movie that I would love to see remade, and the original is brilliant. It's got some great acting by Robert Shaw, and that's The Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain is a really good old movie, and the story is great. Even the action's great.
But can I just interject? Do you want a remake of that movie, or do you just want a new movie based on the Battle of Britain?
Well, no, because
that would just this historic.
Because if it's a new movie made about the Battle of Britain, it'll be about two American fighter pilots that came over to join RAF, and they saved us in the Battle of Britain, like in Pearl Harbor.
Well, if Michael Bay makes it.
Yeah, I want to see a like a reboot. Like that story's a really good story. Like you were saying, movies.
It's okay. It's kind of a by the numbers World War II movie.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
So that's why I say just make a by the numbers World War II movie with modern day technology.
And yeah,
because like let me ask you this: if you made a movie about the Normandy invasion that was all about the first day of the Normandy invasion, would that be a remake of The Longest Day?
Yeah, and see,
it wouldn't.
No,
it'd be a new movie just based on the Normandy invasions.
All right. Okay, then another one is Grand Prix.
Okay, now you're talking.
So,
but again, because Grand Prix is not based on a true story.
No, so Grand Prix is an original story.
It's tough to do remakes based on true stories.
Yeah. So Grand Prix, if nobody's watched it, go watch it. It's a brilliant movie. It's a story about two Grand Prix teammates who have an accident and then have a falling out. One teammate takes the other guy's wife. It's about the other driver's recovery and how he gets back in. But it's set in the 50s, and it's old classic.
Sounds like Talladega Nights.
No, does
he get his house as well?
Yeah,
does he call him in the middle of the night to ask about?
It's actually based on two real teammates, but I don't think they had the accident. But it's set in the 50s. It's got the old classic Formula One cars, and even for the time, if you watch it now, the effects are brilliant. James Caan's great in it, but I'd love to see a modern take on it. Once I watched the film Rush about the Niki Lauda and James Hunt story by Ron Howard, I loved seeing how the cars looked and how the cinematography did Formula One racing. I thought, if they took that and put that into Grand Prix, that would be a brilliant movie. So that's a movie that I love, that I would like to see remade, not rebooted and have the story changed, but remade modern technology.
So then I basically think we have defined it. So a remake is when you redevelop the same story, but it isn't a franchise.
Yeah.
A reboot is when you take a franchise and try to
inject new life
into it.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And a new adaptation is just a new adaptation of an existing separate medium. So, for instance, Total Recall. That's not a remake. It's not a reboot. It's just a failed new adaptation.
Yeah. And if
RoboCop, on the other hand, is a remake.
Yeah. If they'd have called Total Recall something totally different and just changed the name of the characters, it'd have probably worked as a movie.
RoboCop, on the other hand, though, is a remake.
Yeah.
That just
it just cuts out all the violence and the gore that made RoboCop and satire that made RoboCop really good.
And then the Batman, the
Dark Knight trilogy,
the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy is a reboot.
Just quickly on the RoboCop one, they completely missed the point of Verhoeven's movie. Completely, 100%.
Well, most Verhoeven movies, though, it's pretty hard to make a movie like that these days.
So
that's probably why Paul Verhoeven
hasn't
hasn't made anything in a long time.
Looking at the time, I want to quickly throw it out to you. Are there any movies that cannot be ever touched in the remake or reboot? that you would say sacrilege?
I just said Superman. Yeah, 1978 Superman. Don't do it.
But he's making new Superman movies, rebooting Superman though.
Even the reboots, stop it. I didn't like Man of Steel. Just don't do it.
So you're saying don't ever make a Superman movie?
Stop
again?
making Superman movies.
All right.
Stop making Ghostbusters movies.
Well, you don't
Although
know.
I'm a little intrigued for the
new
sequel,
one that comes
but
out might be good.
still, the thing about Ghostbusters is
It was lightning in a bottle.
it was just this novel, neat idea by a bunch of comedy actors from SCTV,
and that's why the
Saturday Night
second
Live.
one didn't really hit all the beats, because the first one was so unique.
Well, exactly. The second one's not very good. It's a little bit of a guilty pleasure, but it's not a very good film. And then
The film's crap, but their interactions are
and
good.
the 2016 reboot is horrible.
Yes.
It's an atrocious mess that should be stricken from the record.
I thought we were never going to speak about that.
And this new film, it's going to be a direct sequel to the first two. So
to the Vigo one.
I'm intrigued, but I just leave it alone, man.
So the only IP that you can think of that should never be touched is Superman.
Oh no, there's lots.
So that's what I'm asking.
I could go at this all day.
Oh, then give me 5 that if ever is touched, you are going to hunt down the director.
So
and then kill
there's
him.
2. The third one would be the Godfather trilogy.
Yep. So that's one of mine. I'll agree with you there.
My fourth one is a little difficult to really think now, because I don't really hold anything as completely sacred, because I could see a Lord of the Rings reboot.
No.
Especially as someone who, as the movies have come, I've aged now a little bit, and someone who read the books growing up as a kid, I am kind of intrigued to see what a more faithful take on the books would be.
If that was going to happen,
I'd like to tell me about just like they're doing it with Amazon.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd like to see an HBO series rather than a movie.
I want to see the stories of the Lord of the Rings told in a more faithful
and on
approach.
A TV show, you could do that.
Yeah, but I'm saying like the actual story of the Lord of the Rings, of Frodo taking the ring to Mount Doom.
As I say, you could do that in the TV show.
I'd like to see what someone 30 years from now, after enough time's passed, could do. Because there's another thing. Yeah. Should you wait a certain amount of time?
Yeah, not how long is it between the Spider-Man movies?
Like 3 years.
Well, I'll give you a couple of mine and then we'll close out. Gone with the Wind. For 2 reasons. One, it's classic. It's generally regarded as the greatest movie of all time. It's the highest grossing movie of all time, adjusted for inflation. Plus, I don't think you could do it justice in the modern era. It is a film of its times, and I'm not saying it should be banned or anything like this. It should be seen for what it is. It's a masterpiece of the time. So, Gone with the Wind. You don't need to reboot Indiana Jones. Rebooting Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford would just... But they'll end up doing it again, because
of course they'll do it.
They've got lack of creativity.
Because the same thing is, Indiana Jones is on the same page to me as Star Trek. It's okay to keep developing sequels to Star Trek, but stop making reboots.
Yeah. See, to me, Indiana Jones is on the same level as Superman for you. Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford.
I would have preferred they didn't make the 2009 Abrams film.
No, I wouldn't.
I remember being excited for it because I thought it was going to be like a remake. I thought it was going to be that we're going to have Matt Jeffries' design of the Enterprise, and we're going to tell a story that you never heard. Just what happened after the 5-year mission or whatever. Just an untold story from the original series, because the original series got cancelled. That's what I was expecting when they announced that reboot.
Yeah.
Even to the point where I saw the first trailer, I never expected what we got in the theatre. No. That's why I was really disappointed.
For me, they should not reboot Godfather, like you said. Ghostbusters shouldn't be rebooted. I don't mind seeing sequel because I'm hoping the sequel does the original proud and pays homage, as it should do, to the 4 great actors that were in the first one. Because obviously we haven't got Harold Ramis with us anymore. So I'm hoping that it's like a salute to what they put to screen. And if it is, great. But the 2016 was the opposite. There's a sequel coming out, but I don't ever want to see rebooted movies of Top Gun, Days of Thunder. To me, those are guilty 80s, 90s pleasures. That's what I love about them.
But it'll probably happen.
I know it will.
As soon as they've, like... Once they're scraping the bottom of the barrel...
Well, think about it. Red Dawn is a classic guilty pleasure of the 80s. It was all about the Red Army invading the US, and they rebooted it.
See, to get to that, they had to go through like all of the good stuff in the barrel to get to the bottom of the barrel.
And they rebooted it. Oh, it was just so bad.
Nah. Just stop doing reboots, really.
Don't reboot Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Stuff that, and to me, a big one is don't reboot stuff that relies heavily on the era that it was made.
That's a big...
if the movie is an 80s movie, don't reboot. Don't reboot Planes, Trains and Automobiles, because you won't be able to capture the Steve Martin, John Candy.
They are, aren't they?
No.
I'm sure they are.
Like that movie heavily depends on the chemistry between Steve Martin and John Candy. You will not get that again, and that's where reboots fail.
Matthew, they are. It's going to star Kevin Hart and Will Smith.
Oh, that's so bad. I think I might end the show there by going outside and topping myself. Come on. You fucking with me?
No. Will Smith and Kevin Hart will star in and produce a remake of the 1987 road comedy Planes, Trains and Automobiles for Paramount Pictures.
Oh, that's so bad.
That is, yeah.
And again, as I said, that movie depends so heavily on the chemistry between those two.
Steve Martin and John Candy.
Sip. Again, another John Candy, Great Outdoors. It's the chemistry of all those actors, the kids, Dan Aykroyd, Annette Bening. It's all about their chemistry.
Do you know,
the movie's actually not that good, but the chemistry of the actors.
You know what the silly thing about a remake...
That's where lack of creativity comes in, when people start doing shit like that.
The silly thing about a remake of Planes, Trains and Automobiles is it's such a simple, self-contained story. What could you...
And it's a good feeling.
What could you offer? What could you offer that film didn't already offer? What could you offer that you couldn't just go back, take that original film, put it in your Blu-ray player, DVD player, VHS player, and just watch it?
You're not going to make a remake. Done. You're not going to make a remake of Aliens or Blazing Saddles because they were specific.
Watch them. Prometheus. It's technically a soft reboot.
Yeah, but it failed. See, there's a good example, like the Total Recall. If Prometheus was called Prometheus and wasn't a prequel to Alien, Prometheus is a good movie. It's a good sci-fi movie. But that connection to Alien and making it a prequel don't make any fucking sense, and it means people...
Yeah, it gives people a certain expectation.
Yeah. If I'd have gone to watch Prometheus and it had nothing to do with Alien, I'd have liked that movie, and I don't mind it anyway. But the fact that it's linked to Alien and it's a prequel, it's just a mess.
Well, I think we better stop before we fucking blow our rectums out of rage. So that's pretty much all I have to say on the matter.
My last thing is saying, stop doing fucking reboots. Do original content. When you do original content and you do it well, it's awesome.
And if you're going to do a reboot, don't fuck it up.
Don't
make sure it's right, or else the fans are coming after you.
Oh yeah, and that's the greatest. What do they call it? Barometer. If you do a reboot, you're taking a chance.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let us know in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with anything we said tonight, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, thanks for watching.
Yeah, and we'll see you later.